Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into what beauty standards were like in medieval times. Let's jump right into the story. In the shadowed halls of medieval castles and the narrow streets of ancient towns, beauty was measured by standards so different from our modern world that they seem almost like stories from another realm entirely. Yet they shaped the lives of countless women and men across centuries of European history, with an influence that touched everything from marriage prospects to spiritual salvation, creating a complex tapestry of ideals that reflected not just aesthetic preferences but deep beliefs about morality, social status, and the very nature of human worth. The medieval understanding of beauty began with the fundamental belief that physical appearance was a reflection of inner virtue and divine favor, a concept that intertwined the spiritual and the material in ways that modern minds sometimes struggle to fully comprehend. For in those times when most people lived their entire lives within a few miles of where they were born, beauty was not merely about attraction or personal preference, but about one's relationship with God, with society, and with the cosmic order that was believed to govern all aspects of existence, from the movement of the stars to the arrangement of facial features. Women in medieval times were expected to embody a very particular type of beauty that emphasized purity, modesty, and fertility above all other qualities. And this ideal was so deeply ingrained in the culture that it appeared not only in the literature and art of the period, but also in religious writings, medical texts, and even legal documents that specified the characteristics that made a woman desirable as a wife, a mother, or a member of religious communities that valued spiritual beauty as much as physical appearance. The face that was considered most beautiful in medieval times was one that would seem almost ethereal to modern eyes, with skin so pale that it appeared nearly translucent, as if the woman had never been touched by the harsh light of the sun or the rough winds of outdoor labor. And this paleness was not merely a preference but a symbol of noble birth and leisured life, indicating that the woman had never needed to work in the fields or engage in any activity that might tan or roughen her complexion, making her skin a visible marker of social class that could be read as easily as any coat of arms or heraldic symbol. To achieve this coveted pallor, medieval women employed a variety of methods that ranged from the simple to the dangerous, spending hours indoors during the brightest parts of the day, wearing wide-brimmed hats when they ventured outside, and applying various concoctions made from ingredients like lead and mercury that promised to whiten the skin, but often caused serious health problems including poisoning, hair loss, and even death. Though the pursuit of beauty was considered so important that many women were willing to accept these risks, rather than appear with the sun-darkened skin that marked them as members of the working class. The ideal medieval face was not only pale, but also featured eyes that were large and expressive, with eyebrows that were thin and arched high above the brow, often plucked to create an unnaturally high forehead that was considered a sign of intelligence and noble breeding. And many women would pluck not only their eyebrows, but also the hair along their hairline to create the appearance of having a forehead that extended much higher than nature had intended. sometimes removing so much hair that their heads looked almost alien by modern standards. Yet this was the height of fashion and refinement in their time. The mouth that was most prized in medieval beauty standards was small and delicate, with lips that were naturally red or enhanced with subtle coloring from berries or other natural substances, but never painted in the bold, obvious way that might suggest vanity or worldliness. For the ideal woman was supposed to possess a natural beauty that appeared effortless and divinely granted, rather than artificially created through cosmetics or other enhancements that might indicate an unseemly concern with worldly appearance rather than spiritual development and moral virtue. Hair in medieval times was considered one of a woman's most important features, and the standards for beautiful hair were both specific and demanding, requiring that it be long enough to reach at least to the waist when unbound, thick enough to braid into elaborate styles, and golden or reddish in color, with blonde hair being particularly prized as a sign of angelic purity and divine favor. Though women with darker hair might lighten it using various concoctions that included ingredients like sulfur, lead, and even urine, despite the unpleasant smell and potential health risks associated with such treatments. The way a woman arranged her hair was also crucial to her overall beauty and social standing, with unmarried women expected to wear their hair loose or in simple braids that symbolized their virginity and availability for marriage, while married women were required to cover their hair completely with veils, caps, or elaborate headdresses that indicated their change in status and their commitment to modesty and respectability, making hair both a symbol of feminine beauty and a marker of social and moral position that needed to be displayed or concealed according to strict cultural rules. Medieval beauty standards also placed great emphasis on the shape and carriage of a woman's body, favoring a figure that was slender but not thin, with a small waist, narrow shoulders, and hips that were wide enough to suggest fertility, but not so pronounced as to appear crude or overly sexual. And this ideal body was typically achieved through the use of tightly laced corsets and carefully constructed clothing that could reshape a woman's natural proportions to match the fashionable silhouette of the time, sometimes to the point of causing breathing difficulties and other health problems that were considered acceptable prices to pay for beauty. The hands of a medieval woman were also subject to specific beauty standards that reflected both aesthetic preferences and social expectations, with the ideal hands being small, soft, and white, with long, tapered fingers that had never been roughened by manual labor, and nails that were clean and well-maintained but never painted or decorated in ways that might suggest vanity or frivolity. For beautiful hands were seen as evidence of a woman's gentle breeding and her freedom from the necessity of working for her living. Clothing played an enormous role in medieval beauty standards, not just as decoration, but as a way of shaping the body and communicating social status, moral character, and personal taste through the choice of fabrics, colors, and styles that were available only to certain classes of society, with the most beautiful and fashionable garments being made from expensive materials like silk, velvet, and fine wool that were often imported from distant lands at great cost. making clothing a form of wearable wealth that advertised a family's prosperity and social position. To anyone who knew how to read the subtle language of medieval fashion, the colors that were considered most beautiful and appropriate for women varied depending on their age, marital status, and social position, with young unmarried women typically wearing bright colors like red, blue, and green that symbolized youth, vitality, and availability for marriage, while older women and those in mourning were expected to wear more subdued shades like brown, gray, and black that indicated their withdrawal from worldly concerns and their focus on spiritual rather than material beauty. Though wealthy women of all ages might incorporate expensive dyes like purple and gold that were so costly they were reserved for royalty and the highest nobility, the medieval understanding of beauty also extended to concepts of proportion and harmony that were influenced by classical Greek and Roman ideals as well as Christian theology, with the most beautiful faces and bodies being those that displayed perfect mathematical relationships between different features, such as the distance between the eyes being exactly equal to the width of one eye, or the length of the nose being proportional to the height of the forehead, creating an overall appearance of balance and order that was believed to reflect the divine geometry that governed all creation. Men in medieval times were also subject to beauty standards, though these were often quite different from those applied to women, emphasizing physical strength, martial prowess, and noble bearing over the delicate refinement that was prized in feminine beauty, with the ideal medieval man being tall and broad-shouldered, with a commanding presence that spoke of his ability to protect his family and defend his lands, and features that were strong and masculine without being crude or brutish, suggesting both physical power and moral authority. The medieval male beauty ideal included hair that was typically worn longer than modern men might choose, often reaching to the shoulders or beyond, and carefully groomed to suggest both virility and refinement, with beards being fashionable at some periods and clean-shaven faces preferred at others, depending on the changing styles that swept through the courts and major cities, influencing fashion trends that might take months or years to reach smaller towns and rural areas, where people relied on traveling merchants and visiting nobles for information about the latest developments in appearance and dress. Social class played an enormous role in determining what beauty standards individuals were expected to meet, with nobles and wealthy merchants having access to expensive cosmetics, fine clothing, and the leisure time necessary to maintain elaborate grooming routines, while peasants and working people were expected to focus on cleanliness and modesty rather than fashion or ornamentation. Though even among the lower classes, there were standards of attractiveness that emphasized health, fertility, and the ability to work hard and bear children successfully. The church had a significant influence on medieval beauty standards, promoting ideals that emphasized inner virtue over external appearance, while simultaneously creating artistic and architectural works that celebrated divine beauty through elaborate decoration, colorful stained glass, and richly ornamented religious garments that demonstrated that beauty itself was not sinful, but rather a reflection of God's creation, as long as it was pursued with proper moderation and always subordinated to spiritual concerns and moral development. Religious women, particularly nuns and other members of religious orders, were expected to renounce worldly beauty entirely, shaving or cutting their hair short, wearing simple clothing in neutral colors, and avoiding any form of decoration or enhancement that might distract from their spiritual focus. Yet even within these restrictions, there were subtle hierarchies of appearance that indicated rank and status within religious communities, with abbesses and other leaders often wearing more elaborate versions of religious garments that maintained modesty, while still acknowledging their important positions. Medieval medical theories about beauty were based on the classical concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which were believed to determine not only a person's health and personality, but also their physical appearance, with the most beautiful people being those who maintained perfect balance among these humors through proper diet, exercise, and lifestyle choices, while those who suffered from illness or moral failings were thought to display their internal problems through external signs like blemishes, unusual coloring, or disproportionate features. The medieval understanding of aging and beauty was quite different from modern perspectives, with older women often being valued for their wisdom and experience rather than their physical appearance, though there was still pressure to maintain dignity and respectability through careful grooming and appropriate dress that acknowledged their changed status in society, while older men might actually gain in attractiveness as they acquired wealth, power, and social position that more than compensated for any decline in their physical appearance. Regional variations in medieval beauty standards were significant, with the ideals promoted in the courts of France differing markedly from those favored in England, Germany, or Italy. And these differences reflected not only aesthetic preferences, but also cultural values, economic conditions, and social structures that varied considerably across the medieval world, creating a complex patchwork of beauty ideals that could change dramatically depending on geography, politics, and the influence of different noble families who set fashion trends for their regions. The rise of courtly love as a cultural phenomenon in the later medieval period introduced new concepts of beauty that emphasized the spiritual and emotional connection between lovers over purely physical attraction, promoting an ideal of feminine beauty that was almost otherworldly in its perfection, with women being praised for qualities like grace, virtue, and intellectual accomplishment as well as physical appearance, creating a more complex understanding of beauty that influenced literature, art, and social relationships for centuries to come. Medieval literature provides numerous examples of beauty standards in action, with epic poems, romantic tales, and religious texts all describing their most admirable characters in terms that reveal the aesthetic preferences of their time. From the pale, golden-haired heroines of courtly romances to the strong, noble-featured knights who won their hearts. And these literary descriptions often provide more detailed information about medieval beauty ideals than surviving artwork, which was often stylized or symbolic rather than realistic in its portrayal of human appearance. The role of cosmetics in medieval beauty culture was complicated by religious and social restrictions that discouraged obvious enhancement while still allowing for subtle improvements to natural appearance, leading to the development of cosmetic products that promise to enhance beauty without appearing artificial, including various preparations for whitening teeth, sweetening breath, and improving the texture and color of skin. Though many of these products contained dangerous ingredients that could cause more harm than benefit to those who use them regularly. Jewelry and accessories played important roles in medieval beauty standards, with the right ornaments being able to enhance a person's natural attractiveness, while also communicating their social status, wealth, and taste. Though the wearing of jewelry was heavily regulated by sumptuary laws that specified which types of ornaments could be worn by people of different social classes, preventing those of lower status from adopting the appearance of their superiors, and maintaining clear visual distinctions between different levels of society. The medieval understanding of beauty also encompassed concepts of moral and spiritual beauty that were considered just as important as, if not more important than, physical appearance, with the most admired individuals being those who combined external attractiveness with inner virtue, charitable behavior, and devotion to God and community, creating a holistic view of human beauty that encompassed the entire person, rather than focusing solely on superficial characteristics. Marriage negotiations in medieval times often involved detailed discussions of the bride's beauty and the groom's handsomeness, with these physical qualities being considered important factors in determining the success of the union and the attractiveness of the children who might result from it. Though beauty was always balanced against other considerations like family connections, financial resources, and social compatibility, making physical appearance just one element in complex calculations about marriage alliances and family strategies. The influence of classical Greek and Roman beauty ideals on medieval culture was transmitted through various channels, including surviving artworks, literary texts, and scholarly writings that preserved ancient knowledge about proportion, harmony, and aesthetic principles. Though these classical ideals were often modified by Christian teachings and contemporary social values, creating hybrid beauty standards that combined pagan and Christian elements in sometimes surprising and contradictory ways. Medieval artists and craftsmen played crucial roles in defining and disseminating beauty standards through their work on religious buildings, illuminated manuscripts, tapestries, and other decorative objects that presented idealized images of human beauty for public viewing and private contemplation. Though the stylized nature of much medieval art means that these images may not always accurately reflect the actual appearance of real people, but rather represent symbolic or aspirational versions of beauty that emphasized spiritual and moral qualities over realistic physical characteristics. The concept of natural versus artificial beauty was a constant source of tension in medieval culture, with religious and philosophical traditions generally favoring unenhanced natural appearance, while practical considerations and social pressures encouraged the use of cosmetics, clothing, and other enhancements to improve one's appearance and social standing, creating ongoing debates about the proper relationship between inner virtue and outer beauty. that influenced everything from personal grooming choices to theological discussions about the nature of divine creation. Different social occasions called for different approaches to beauty in medieval times, with religious ceremonies requiring modest, understated appearance that focused attention on spiritual rather than worldly concerns, while secular celebrations like weddings, festivals, and court gatherings encouraged more elaborate dress and ornamentation that celebrated human creativity and the abundance of God's creation. Though even on these festive occasions, there were limits to what was considered appropriate based on one's age, marital status, and social position. The seasonal cycle also influenced medieval beauty practices, with different times of year calling for different approaches to clothing, grooming, and personal presentation. From the heavy fabrics and rich colors appropriate for winter celebrations to the lighter materials and more subdued tones suitable for the penitential seasons of the church calendar, creating a rhythm of beauty practices that followed both natural and liturgical calendars throughout the year. Medieval beauty standards were not static, but evolved gradually over the centuries, influenced by changing social conditions, economic developments, technological innovations, and cultural exchanges with other civilizations through trade, warfare, and diplomatic contact, creating a dynamic system of aesthetic preferences that responded to historical events and social transformations, while maintaining certain core elements that remained consistent across different periods and regions. The role of professional beauty practitioners in medieval society included barbers who provided not only haircuts and shaves, but also medical treatments and cosmetic services, bathhouse attendants who helped customers maintain cleanliness and grooming standards, and various specialists who created cosmetics, perfumes, and other beauty products for those who could afford such luxuries. Though these professionals often operated under social and legal restrictions that reflected the complex attitudes toward beauty and vanity in medieval culture. Women's beauty practices in medieval times required significant time and effort, with elaborate hairstyles taking hours to arrange, clothing requiring careful maintenance and proper storage to preserve expensive fabrics, and skincare routines involving multiple steps and various preparations that needed to be applied at different times of day, making the pursuit of beauty a time-consuming activity that was largely restricted to women of leisure who had servants to help with these complex procedures. The medieval understanding of beauty also encompassed concepts of movement and bearing, with the most beautiful people being those who carried themselves with grace, dignity, and appropriate deportment that reflected their social status and moral character, making beauty not just a matter of static physical features, but also of dynamic qualities like posture, gait, gestures, and facial expressions that needed to be carefully cultivated and constantly maintained through conscious attention and practice. The training that young people received in medieval times included specific instruction in the arts of personal presentation and beauty, with noble children learning from an early age how to dress appropriately, speak elegantly, and move with the grace and dignity expected of their social position, while the children of merchants and craftsmen were taught different but equally important lessons about cleanliness, modesty, and the proper appearance for their station in life. creating a comprehensive educational system that ensured everyone understood the beauty standards appropriate to their circumstances. Medieval beauty standards were deeply intertwined with concepts of health and vitality, with the most attractive people being those who displayed visible signs of good physical condition, such as clear skin, bright eyes, strong teeth, and vigorous movement. Though the medieval understanding of health was based on theories about bodily humors and spiritual balance that differed significantly from modern medical knowledge, leading to beauty practices that sometimes promoted health and sometimes undermined it in pursuit of fashionable appearance. The influence of Islamic and Byzantine cultures on medieval European beauty standards came through various channels, including the Crusades, trade relationships, and scholarly exchanges that introduced new cosmetics, fabrics, jewelry designs, and grooming techniques from the East. Though these foreign influences were often adapted and modified to fit European social values and religious requirements, creating hybrid beauty practices that combined elements from different cultural traditions in innovative and sometimes surprising ways. Seasonal festivals and religious celebrations provided opportunities for people to display their finest clothing and most carefully prepared appearance, with events like Easter, Christmas, May Day, and harvest celebrations encouraging elaborate dress and ornamentation that allowed individuals to showcase their prosperity, taste, and social status, while participating in community activities that reinforced shared values and cultural identity through collective displays of beauty and refinement. The medieval guild system had significant influence on beauty standards through its control over the production and distribution of luxury goods, including fine fabrics, jewelry, cosmetics, and other items used in personal ornamentation, with different guilds maintaining strict quality standards and pricing structures that determined who could access various levels of beauty enhancement, while also preserving trade secrets and techniques that were passed down through generations of craftsmen. Professional entertainers in medieval times, including minstrels, jesters, and traveling performers, often served as vectors for the transmission of beauty trends and fashion innovations, as they moved from court to court and town to town, carrying information about the latest styles in clothing, hair arrangements, and personal ornamentation, while also developing their own distinctive aesthetic traditions that influenced broader cultural standards of attractiveness and personal presentation. The medieval understanding of color psychology and symbolism had profound effects on beauty standards, with different hues being associated with specific virtues, social positions, and spiritual qualities that made the choice of clothing colors a complex decision involving considerations of appropriateness, symbolism, and personal taste, while also reflecting the availability and cost of different dyes that made certain colors accessible only to wealthy individuals who could afford the expense of rare and exotic pigments. Medieval medical treatises often included detailed discussions of beauty and appearance, with physicians writing extensively about the connections between internal health and external attractiveness, offering advice on diet, exercise, sleep, and lifestyle choices that promise to enhance physical beauty while also promoting overall well-being. though many of these recommendations were based on theoretical principles rather than empirical observation, and sometimes led to practices that were more harmful than beneficial. The role of mirrors in medieval beauty culture was limited by the technology of the period, with most people relying on polished metal surfaces, still water, or other reflective materials that provided only dim and distorted images, making it difficult for individuals to see themselves clearly, and leading to beauty practices that relied more on the opinions and assistance of others rather than self-examination and personal judgment about appearance. Regional specialties in medieval beauty culture included specific techniques, products, and traditions that were associated with particular geographic areas, such as the elaborate headdresses favored in Burgundy, the distinctive jewelry styles of Celtic regions, or the cosmetic preparations that were developed in Italian city-states, creating a diverse landscape of beauty practices that reflected local resources, cultural influences, and historical traditions, while still participating in broader European trends and developments. The medieval concept of seasonal beauty involved adapting one's appearance to match the natural cycles of the year, with spring calling for fresh, light colors and styles that celebrated renewal and growth, summer requiring practical adjustments to deal with heat while maintaining appropriate modesty, autumn featuring richer tones and heavier fabrics that reflected the harvest season, and winter demanding warm, protective clothing that still managed to convey elegance and refinement despite the harsh weather conditions. Marriage customs and beauty standards were closely connected in medieval society, with wedding ceremonies providing opportunities for brides and grooms to display their finest appearance, while also marking their transition from one social status to another through changes in clothing, hair arrangements, and personal ornamentation that signaled their new roles as married adults with different responsibilities and expectations regarding their public presentation and private behavior. The medieval understanding of age-appropriate beauty involved different standards and expectations for people at various stages of life, with children being valued for innocence and natural charm, young adults for physical perfection and reproductive potential, middle-aged individuals for dignity and accomplishment, and elderly people for wisdom and spiritual development, creating a comprehensive system that acknowledged the changing nature of human attractiveness while maintaining respect for beauty in all its forms. Medieval travel and pilgrimage provided opportunities for the exchange of beauty ideas and practices across different regions and cultures, with travelers returning home with new knowledge about cosmetics, clothing styles, and grooming techniques that they had encountered in foreign lands, while also spreading their own cultural practices to the places they visited, creating a complex network of cultural exchange that influenced the development of beauty standards throughout medieval Europe. The role of servants and attendants in medieval beauty culture was crucial, with wealthy individuals relying on skilled personnel who specialized in various aspects of personal care, including hairdressing, clothing maintenance, cosmetic application, and general grooming assistance. While these service providers often developed their own expertise and innovations that influenced broader beauty practices as they moved between different employers and shared their knowledge with other professionals. Medieval concepts of divine beauty influenced earthly standards through religious art, literature, and theology that described the appearance of saints, angels, and other holy figures in terms that established ideal types of physical and spiritual attractiveness, while also teaching that true beauty came from inner virtue and devotion to God rather than external ornamentation, creating a complex relationship between sacred and secular aesthetic values that shaped personal choices about appearance and self-presentation. The medieval understanding of ethnic and regional differences in beauty included recognition that different populations had distinctive physical characteristics that were considered attractive within their own cultural contexts, though there were also hierarchical assumptions about which types of appearance were most desirable that often reflected political and social power relationships rather than objective aesthetic judgments, creating complex dynamics around questions of beauty, identity, and social status. Technological innovations during the medieval period gradually influenced beauty standards through improvements in textile production, metalworking, glassmaking, and other crafts that made new types of clothing, jewelry, cosmetics, and grooming tools available to broader segments of society, while also enabling the creation of more elaborate and sophisticated forms of personal ornamentation that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in terms of human beauty and artistic achievement. The medieval calendar of religious and secular observances created a rhythm of beauty practices that varied throughout the year, with penitential seasons calling for simpler, more subdued appearance, while celebratory periods encouraged more elaborate dress and ornamentation, requiring individuals to maintain wardrobes and grooming routines that could adapt to these changing requirements while still expressing their personal taste and social status within appropriate bounds. Medieval concepts of masculine beauty evolved over time, with early medieval ideals emphasizing physical strength and warrior qualities, giving way to more refined standards that valued courtly accomplishments, artistic skills, and intellectual achievements alongside traditional masculine virtues, creating a more complex understanding of male attractiveness that reflected changing social conditions and cultural values as medieval society became more sophisticated and urbanized. The influence of classical mythology and literature on medieval beauty standards came through various channels, including manuscript illuminations, stone carvings, and literary works that preserved and transmitted ancient stories about gods, goddesses, and legendary heroes, whose physical descriptions provided models for contemporary beauty ideals. Though these classical influences were often filtered through Christian interpretations that modified pagan concepts to fit medieval moral and religious frameworks, medieval urban centers became important sites for the development and dissemination of beauty culture, with cities providing access to international trade goods, skilled craftsmen, and diverse populations that created cosmopolitan environments where different beauty traditions could interact and influence each other, while also generating the wealth and leisure time necessary for the pursuit of elaborate personal ornamentation and sophisticated grooming practices. The role of women in medieval beauty culture extended beyond their own personal appearance to include responsibility for the grooming and presentation of their families, with wives and mothers expected to ensure that their household members were appropriately dressed and groomed according to their social status and the requirements of various occasions, making beauty and appearance management important aspects of domestic administration and social responsibility. Medieval concepts of beauty and morality were closely connected through religious and philosophical traditions that taught that external appearance reflected internal character, leading to beliefs that beautiful people were more likely to be virtuous and good, while unattractive individuals might be suspected of moral failings. Though there were also countervailing traditions that warned against the dangers of vanity and emphasized the importance of inner beauty over external attractiveness. The medieval understanding of perfect proportions in human beauty was influenced by mathematical and geometric principles that were derived from classical sources and adapted to contemporary aesthetic preferences, with various treatises and artistic works attempting to codify the ideal relationships between different body parts and facial features that would create the most harmonious and attractive overall appearance. Though these theoretical standards were often difficult to achieve in practice, medieval beauty practices often involved significant physical discomfort and health risks, with tight-laced corsets restricting breathing and movement, heavy makeup containing toxic ingredients causing skin damage, and elaborate hairstyles requiring hours of painful styling that could lead to hair loss and scalp problems. Yet these risks were generally considered acceptable prices to pay for achieving fashionable appearance and maintaining social status in competitive court and urban environments. The medieval guild system's influence on beauty culture extended to the regulation of professional beauty services, with barbers, perfumers, and other specialists operating under strict rules that governed their training, pricing, and business practices, while also maintaining quality standards that protected consumers from dangerous or ineffective products and services, creating a somewhat regulated marketplace for beauty goods and services that balanced commercial interests with public safety concerns. Regional climate and geography had significant effects on medieval beauty standards, with Northern European preferences for pale skin, reflecting both social hierarchies and practical adaptations to limited sunlight, while Mediterranean regions developed different approaches to color, fabric choices, and grooming practices that were appropriate to warmer climates and different cultural influences, creating diverse regional traditions within the broader framework of medieval European beauty culture. The medieval understanding of beauty and sexuality involved complex negotiations between religious teachings about modesty and chastity and practical social needs for attraction and reproduction, leading to beauty standards that attempted to enhance attractiveness while avoiding obvious sexual display, creating subtle forms of ornamentation and presentation that could suggest desirability without violating moral and religious strictures against vanity and worldliness. Medieval concepts of beauty and social mobility were closely connected, with appearance serving as both a marker of current status and a potential pathway to advancement. As individuals who could successfully adopt the grooming standards and fashion choices of higher social classes might gain access to better marriage prospects, employment opportunities, and social connections. Though such mobility was limited by legal restrictions and economic barriers that prevented most people from dramatically altering their social position. The role of international trade in medieval beauty culture was crucial, with luxury goods like silk fabrics, precious metals, exotic spices, and rare pigments traveling vast distances through complex commercial networks that connected European consumers to producers in Asia, Africa, and other distant regions, making personal beauty and ornamentation important economic activities that supported merchants, craftsmen, and transportation systems across the medieval world. Medieval concepts of beauty and spiritual development were influenced by monastic traditions that emphasized the cultivation of inner virtue over external appearance. Though these religious ideals coexisted with secular traditions that celebrated human creativity and divine artistry through elaborate personal ornamentation, creating ongoing tensions between worldly and spiritual approaches to beauty that individuals needed to navigate in their daily lives and personal choices. The medieval understanding of beauty and aging involved acceptance of physical changes over time, while maintaining expectations that people would continue to present themselves appropriately according to their age, social status, and circumstances, with different beauty standards applying to different life stages, while still recognizing that attractiveness could take many forms, and that dignity and grace were important components of beauty at any age. Medieval beauty practices often involved elaborate preparation rituals that could take hours or even days to complete, with special occasions requiring extensive planning and coordination between individuals and their servants or family members, who assisted with complicated hairstyles, clothing arrangements, and cosmetic applications, making beauty preparation itself an important social activity that reinforced relationships and cultural values, while creating opportunities for the transmission of knowledge and techniques between generations. The influence of courtly culture on medieval beauty standards was profound, with royal and noble courts serving as centers for the development and dissemination of fashion trends that would eventually spread throughout society. Though the adoption of courtly styles by lower social classes was often delayed by economic constraints and sometimes actively discouraged by sumptuary laws that sought to maintain clear distinctions between different levels of society through visible differences in dress and appearance. Medieval concepts of beauty and health were based on holistic understandings of human well-being that emphasized balance between physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of existence, leading to beauty practices that attempted to enhance overall vitality and harmony rather than focusing solely on superficial appearance. Though the theoretical principles underlying these practices were often flawed by contemporary standards and sometimes led to treatments that were more harmful than beneficial. The role of seasonal changes in medieval beauty culture involved not only practical adaptations to weather conditions, but also symbolic alignments with natural cycles that were believed to influence human health, mood, and attractiveness. leading to grooming and fashion practices that celebrated the changing seasons, while also acknowledging the spiritual and cosmic significance of these natural rhythms in medieval worldviews. Medieval beauty standards continued to evolve throughout the period in response to changing social, economic, and cultural conditions, with the early medieval emphasis on simple, functional appearance gradually giving way to more elaborate and sophisticated practices that reflected increasing prosperity, urbanization, and cultural exchange, while also incorporating new influences from classical learning, international trade, and technological innovation that would eventually lead to the Renaissance transformation of European beauty culture. The legacy of medieval beauty standards continued to influence European culture long after the medieval period ended, with many concepts about appropriate appearance, social hierarchy, and the relationship between external beauty and internal virtue persisting into later centuries, and continuing to shape ideas about personal presentation, fashion, and aesthetics that would evolve but never entirely abandon their medieval foundations, creating continuities that connected medieval beauty culture to subsequent developments in European and eventually global approaches to human appearance and attractiveness. The medieval period's understanding of beauty extended far beyond simple aesthetic preferences to encompass entire worldviews about human nature, divine creation, and social order that shaped not only individual choices about appearance, but also broader cultural attitudes toward art, architecture, literature, and the organization of society itself, creating a comprehensive system of values that used physical beauty as both a symbol and a tool for understanding humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy that medieval thinkers believed governed all existence, from the smallest details of personal grooming to the grandest expressions of artistic and spiritual achievement. Medieval women who possessed exceptional beauty often found themselves in positions of significant power and influence, with their physical attractiveness serving as a form of social capital that could be leveraged to secure advantageous marriages, gain access to wealthy patrons, or even influence political decisions through their relationships with powerful men, though this power was always precarious and dependent on maintaining their appearance according to the exacting standards of their time, making beauty both a blessing and a burden that required constant attention and careful management to preserve its benefits while avoiding its potential dangers. The medieval understanding of beauty and memory involved complex relationships between visual appeal and psychological impact, with beautiful objects, places, and people being considered more memorable and therefore more effective as vehicles for important cultural messages, religious teachings, and social values, leading to deliberate cultivation of beauty in everything from illuminated manuscripts to cathedral architecture, as a way of ensuring that crucial information would be preserved and transmitted across generations through its association with aesthetically pleasing forms. Medieval concepts of beauty and craftsmanship were intimately connected, with the most beautiful objects being those that displayed the highest levels of technical skill, artistic innovation, and material quality, creating a culture that valued human creativity and divine inspiration equally, while recognizing that true beauty required both natural talent and years of dedicated training to achieve the mastery necessary for creating works that could inspire wonder, devotion, and aesthetic pleasure in those who encountered them. The role of gardens and landscaping in medieval beauty culture was significant, with wealthy individuals creating elaborate outdoor spaces that combined practical functions like food production and medicinal herb cultivation with aesthetic pleasures derived from carefully arranged flowers, trees, and water features that provided settings for social gatherings, private contemplation, and the display of horticultural knowledge and artistic taste that reflected their owners' sophistication and cultural refinement. Medieval beauty practices often involved the use of symbolic elements that carried meanings beyond their immediate aesthetic effects, with colors, patterns, fabrics, and ornamental motifs serving as forms of visual communication that could convey information about the wearer's family history, political allegiances, religious devotion, and personal characteristics to viewers who possessed the cultural knowledge necessary to decode these complex visual messages embedded in clothing, jewelry, and personal accessories. The medieval understanding of beauty and time involved recognition that physical attractiveness was temporary and would inevitably fade with age, leading to philosophical and religious teachings that emphasized the importance of developing inner beauty and spiritual virtues that would endure beyond the brief flowering of youthful physical appeal, while also creating cultural practices that celebrated beauty in all its forms, while acknowledging its transient nature and encouraging appropriate responses to the changes that time brought to human appearance. Medieval concepts of beauty and proportion were influenced by musical theories that drew connections between visual harmony and auditory pleasure, with the most beautiful objects and people being those whose features displayed relationships similar to the mathematical ratios that created pleasing musical intervals, leading to attempts to apply musical principles to architecture, art, and even human appearance in pursuit of aesthetic effects that would appeal to multiple senses simultaneously and create experiences of transcendent beauty. The influence of pilgrimage routes on medieval beauty culture was considerable, with travelers along these religious highways encountering diverse regional traditions, foreign customs, and exotic goods that broadened their understanding of aesthetic possibilities, while also creating markets for luxury items, cosmetic preparations, and fashion innovations that spread throughout Europe along the same paths that carried pilgrims to holy sites and brought them home with expanded cultural knowledge and refined tastes. Medieval women's beauty practices often required collaboration and mutual assistance, with friends, family members, and servants working together to achieve the elaborate hairstyles, complex clothing arrangements, and careful cosmetic applications that fashionable appearance demanded, creating social networks based on shared knowledge about beauty techniques, while also providing opportunities for older women to pass their expertise to younger generations through hands-on training in the arts of personal presentation and aesthetic refinement. The medieval understanding of beauty and education included recognition that true attractiveness required not only physical appeal, but also intellectual accomplishment, cultural knowledge, and refined manners that could only be acquired through formal learning and careful social training, leading to educational systems that emphasize the development of both inner and outer beauty as complementary aspects of complete human development that prepared young people for their adult roles in society. Medieval concepts of beauty and warfare might seem contradictory, but warriors and knights were expected to maintain high standards of personal appearance even in military contexts, with elaborate armor, decorated weapons, and carefully groomed horses, serving not only practical functions, but also aesthetic purposes that communicated their owners' wealth, skill, and noble status, while intimidating enemies and inspiring allies through displays of martial beauty that combined functionality with artistic expression. The role of seasonal festivals in medieval beauty culture provided regular opportunities for communities to celebrate collective aesthetic achievements through coordinated displays of fine clothing, decorative objects, and carefully prepared food that transformed ordinary towns and villages into temporary works of art that expressed shared values and cultural identity, while also providing entertainment and social bonding experiences that reinforced community cohesion and cultural continuity. Medieval understanding of beauty and medicine was based on theories that connected physical attractiveness to overall health and moral character, with physicians prescribing treatments that promised to enhance appearance while also improving general well-being through dietary modifications, herbal remedies, and lifestyle changes that reflected holistic approaches to human health that recognized the interconnections between physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of human existence. The medieval concept of divine beauty influenced earthly aesthetic standards through theological teachings that described God, angels, and saints in terms that established ideals of perfect appearance, while also emphasizing that true beauty came from spiritual virtue rather than physical perfection, creating complex relationships between religious and secular beauty standards that required individuals to navigate carefully between worldly vanity and appropriate appreciation for divine artistry expressed through human appearance. Medieval beauty practices often involved significant economic investment, with wealthy individuals spending substantial portions of their income on fine clothing, precious jewelry, exotic cosmetics, and professional grooming services that served not only personal aesthetic goals, but also important social and political functions related to status display, alliance formation, and cultural participation that made beauty expenses essential rather than frivolous aspects of medieval life. The influence of classical literature on medieval beauty standards came through various channels, including educational curricula that exposed educated elites to ancient texts describing ideal human appearance, artistic traditions that preserved classical aesthetic principles in visual form, and philosophical works that transmitted Greek and Roman theories about beauty, proportion, and artistic achievement to medieval thinkers who adapted these ancient ideas to contemporary Christian and social contexts. Medieval concepts of beauty and nationality were complex, with different regions developing distinctive aesthetic traditions that reflected local climate, available resources, cultural influences, and historical experiences, while still participating in broader European trends that created shared frameworks for understanding and evaluating human attractiveness across linguistic, political, and geographic boundaries that divided the medieval world into numerous competing kingdoms and territories. The role of professional artists and craftsmen in medieval beauty culture extended beyond the creation of decorative objects to include direct services to wealthy clients who employed painters, sculptors, goldsmiths, and other specialists to create personalized items that enhanced their appearance and communicated their taste, wealth, and cultural sophistication through custom-made jewelry, clothing accessories, and household objects that served both practical and aesthetic functions. Medieval understanding of beauty and psychology recognized that attractive appearance could influence mood, behavior, and social relationships in powerful ways, leading to deliberate cultivation of beautiful environments, clothing, and personal presentation as tools for achieving desired psychological and social outcomes. Though these practices were always balanced against religious warnings about vanity and the importance of maintaining proper focus on spiritual rather than worldly concerns. The medieval concept of seasonal beauty involved not only adaptation to changing weather conditions, but also alignment with liturgical calendars that prescribed appropriate colors, fabrics, and ornamental styles for different religious seasons, creating complex systems of aesthetic choice that required knowledge of both fashion trends and religious requirements, while also allowing for personal expression within culturally acceptable boundaries. Medieval beauty standards were transmitted across generations through various educational systems, including formal apprenticeships for craftsmen, informal family training for domestic skills, and aristocratic courts, where young nobles learned refined manners and aesthetic appreciation through direct observation and instruction from older, more experienced members of their social class, who served as mentors and role models in matters of taste and cultural refinement. The influence of Islamic culture on medieval European beauty practices was significant, particularly in regions like Spain and Sicily, where Christian and Muslim populations interacted regularly, leading to the adoption of new cosmetic preparations, clothing styles, decorative techniques, and grooming practices that enriched European aesthetic traditions while also creating cultural tensions around questions of religious identity and appropriate borrowing from foreign sources. Medieval concepts of beauty and spirituality were complex, with religious traditions simultaneously celebrating divine artistry expressed through human appearance, while warning against excessive attention to worldly vanity, creating ongoing tensions that individuals needed to navigate through careful attention to religious teachings, social expectations, and personal conscience, while pursuing appropriate levels of aesthetic refinement that honored both divine creation and human dignity. The role of mirrors and reflective surfaces in medieval beauty culture was limited by technological constraints, but the few mirrors that existed were highly valued possessions that served not only practical functions for grooming and self-examination, but also symbolic purposes related to self-knowledge, moral reflection, and the complex relationships between external appearance and internal character that were central to medieval philosophical and religious thought about human nature and spiritual development. Medieval understanding of beauty and social mobility recognized that appearance could serve as both a marker of current status and a tool for advancement, with individuals who successfully adopted the aesthetic standards of higher social classes gaining access to better opportunities, while also risking criticism for inappropriate ambition or dishonesty about their true social position, creating complex dynamics around questions of authenticity, aspiration, and the proper relationship between appearance and social reality. The medieval period's approach to beauty and aging involved acceptance of physical changes, while maintaining expectations for appropriate presentation at different life stages, with cultural frameworks that recognized various types of attractiveness associated with youth, maturity, and old age, while also providing guidance about how to adapt appearance standards to changing circumstances and social roles throughout the human lifespan. Medieval concepts of beauty and community were closely connected, with individual appearance choices reflecting not only personal taste, but also family reputation, social group membership, and community values that made beauty practices collective rather than purely individual concerns, requiring consideration of how personal aesthetic decisions would affect others and contribute to or detract from broader cultural goals related to social harmony, moral instruction, and spiritual development. The influence of technological innovation on medieval beauty culture was gradual but significant, with improvements in textile production, metalworking, and other crafts enabling new forms of ornamentation and personal enhancement, while also making existing beauty products and services more widely available to broader segments of society. Though access remained limited by economic constraints and social regulations that maintained clear distinctions between different classes. Medieval beauty practices often served multiple functions simultaneously, with the same clothing, jewelry, or grooming routine providing aesthetic pleasure, social communication, religious expression, and practical protection or functionality, creating efficient systems that maximize the benefits derived from limited resources, while also demonstrating the sophisticated understanding of human needs and desires that characterized medieval approaches to art, culture, and daily life. The legacy of medieval beauty standards continued to influence European culture for centuries after the medieval period ended, with many fundamental concepts about appropriate appearance, social hierarchy, and the relationship between external beauty and internal character, persisting in modified forms through subsequent historical periods, and contributing to ongoing debates about fashion, aesthetics, and human values that remain relevant to contemporary discussions about beauty, identity, and cultural expression in modern society. Medieval beauty standards also encompass the intricate art of perfumery and scent, with fragrance being considered an essential component of personal attractiveness that could enhance or diminish one's overall appeal, depending on the skillful blending of natural ingredients like rose petals, lavender, herbs, and exotic spices that were imported at great expense from distant lands, creating personalized scents that became as much a part of an individual's identity as their clothing or hairstyle. And wealthy medieval people often employed specialized perfumers who guarded their formulas jealously, while creating unique combinations that would distinguish their clients from others in their social circles. The medieval understanding of scent and beauty was deeply connected to medical theories about health and humoral balance, with different fragrances being prescribed not only for their pleasant aromas, but also for their supposed ability to correct imbalances in the body's natural systems, ward off disease, and enhance both physical and mental well-being, leading to the development of complex aromatic preparations that served multiple purposes simultaneously, while also providing the wearer with an invisible aura of refinement and sophistication that could be detected by others, even when visual elements of their appearance were concealed or obscured. Medieval concepts of beauty and identity were closely intertwined, with personal appearance serving as a primary means of communicating one's place in society, family connections, professional affiliations, and moral character to others who encountered them in daily life, making clothing choices, grooming practices, and decorative accessories into forms of visual autobiography that told detailed stories about the wearer's background, achievements, aspirations, and values through carefully selected symbols, colors, and styles that functioned as a complex language understood by those who shared the same cultural knowledge and social frameworks. The role of textiles in medieval beauty culture was paramount, with the quality, color, and origin of fabrics serving as immediate indicators of wealth, status, and aesthetic sophistication, while also providing opportunities for artistic expression through the intricate weaving patterns, embroidered decorations, and innovative dyeing techniques that transformed simple cloth into works of art that enhanced the beauty of those who wore them, while also demonstrating the skill and creativity of the craftsmen who produced these remarkable materials under challenging technological and economic conditions. Medieval beauty practices often involved elaborate preparation rituals that began hours or even days before important social occasions, with participants engaging in complex sequences of bathing, hair styling, cosmetic application, and clothing selection that required the assistance of family members, servants, and sometimes professional specialists who possessed the knowledge and experience necessary to achieve the sophisticated looks that fashionable society demanded, making beauty preparation itself a significant social activity that reinforced relationships and cultural traditions, while also providing opportunities for the transmission of skills and knowledge between generations. The medieval understanding of beauty and virtue was complicated by ongoing tensions between religious teachings that emphasized inner spiritual development over external ornamentation and social realities that required appropriate appearance for successful participation in secular society, leading to complex negotiations about how much attention to personal beauty was morally acceptable while still maintaining the level of refinement necessary for fulfilling one's social obligations and representing one's family and community with appropriate dignity and respectability. Medieval concepts of beauty and craftsmanship extended to the creation of specialized tools and implements used in grooming and personal care, with wealthy individuals commissioning elaborately decorated combs, mirrors, jewelry boxes, and cosmetic containers that were works of art in their own right while also serving practical functions, demonstrating the medieval belief that everyday objects should be beautiful as well as useful, and that surrounding oneself with aesthetically pleasing items contributed to overall quality of life and cultural refinement. The influence of seasonal changes on medieval beauty practices was profound, with different times of year calling for distinct approaches to clothing, color selection, fabric choices, and even hairstyles that reflected both practical considerations related to weather and temperature, as well as symbolic associations between natural cycles and human experience that were deeply embedded in medieval cultural consciousness and religious observance, creating annual rhythms of aesthetic change that connected personal appearance to the larger patterns of cosmic order that medieval people believed governed all aspects of existence. Medieval understanding of beauty and social relationships recognized that attractive appearance could facilitate or complicate interactions with others, depending on how successfully individuals managed to balance personal appeal with appropriate modesty and social propriety, leading to sophisticated strategies for enhancing attractiveness while avoiding the dangers of seeming vain, sexually provocative, or inappropriately ambitious about advancing beyond one's designated social position through the manipulation of appearance and aesthetic charm. The role of regional variations in medieval beauty standards reflected the complex political, economic, and cultural geography of medieval Europe, with different kingdoms, duchies, and city-states developing distinctive aesthetic traditions that expressed local identity, while also participating in broader international trends transmitted through trade networks, diplomatic exchanges, and cultural migration that created a rich tapestry of beauty practices across the continent. Medieval concepts of beauty and education included the teaching of aesthetic appreciation and artistic judgment as important components of complete human development, with young people learning to evaluate and create beautiful objects, spaces, and experiences as part of their preparation for adult roles in society, whether as nobles who would need to demonstrate cultural sophistication, merchants who would need to assess the quality and appeal of luxury goods, or craftsmen who would need to produce items that met contemporary standards of beauty and functionality. The medieval understanding of beauty and memory involved recognition that aesthetically pleasing experiences were more likely to be remembered and valued than mundane or ugly ones, leading to deliberate cultivation of beauty in important contexts like religious ceremonies, educational settings, and social gatherings, as a way of ensuring that crucial cultural messages would be preserved and transmitted effectively across generations through their association with memorable visual, auditory, and tactile pleasures. Medieval beauty practices often served as forms of social bonding and community building, with groups of women working together to achieve elaborate hairstyles and clothing arrangements, while sharing knowledge about cosmetic preparations and beauty techniques, creating networks of mutual assistance and cultural transmission that strengthened relationships while also ensuring that aesthetic skills and knowledge would be preserved and passed down to future generations through hands-on learning and collaborative practice. The medieval concept of divine beauty influenced earthly standards through religious art and literature that described heavenly beings in terms of perfect physical appearance, combined with radiant spiritual presence, establishing ideals that mortal humans could aspire to through careful attention to both external grooming and internal virtue, while also teaching that ultimate beauty came from alignment with divine, rather than merely human aesthetic preferences or social fashion trends. Medieval understanding of beauty and technology involved appreciation for the skill and innovation required to create the tools, materials, and techniques that made sophisticated appearance possible, with admiration for craftsmen who could produce fine fabrics, precious jewelry, and effective cosmetic preparations under the technological constraints of their time, leading to recognition that beauty was not just a natural gift, but also an achievement that required human creativity, knowledge, and dedicated effort to realize fully. The influence of courtly culture on medieval beauty standards extended beyond fashion trends to include entire philosophies of aesthetic refinement that emphasized the cultivation of grace, elegance, and sophisticated taste as essential qualities for successful participation in elite social circles, creating educational systems and cultural practices that prepared individuals for the complex aesthetic demands of court life, while also establishing models of refined behavior that influenced broader social standards throughout medieval society. Medieval concepts of beauty and morality were expressed through sumptuary laws and social regulations that attempted to control who could wear certain types of clothing, jewelry, and ornamentation based on their social status, moral character, and economic position, reflecting beliefs that appearance should accurately represent inner reality, and that deceptive or inappropriate self-presentation threatened social order and moral clarity by creating confusion about individuals' true nature and proper place in society. The role of professional beauty services in medieval culture included not only individual practitioners like barbers and cosmetic specialists, but also organized workshops and guilds that maintained quality standards, preserved trade secrets, and regulated competition, while also providing training for new practitioners and ensuring that beauty services would remain available to those who could afford them despite economic fluctuations and social changes that might otherwise disrupt these specialized markets. Medieval beauty standards were influenced by philosophical theories about harmony, proportion, and aesthetic pleasure that drew connections between physical beauty and mathematical principles, musical ratios, and geometric relationships, leading to attempts to apply systematic approaches to human appearance that would create objectively beautiful results based on universal principles rather than merely subjective preferences or temporary fashion trends that might change without regard for underlying aesthetic truths. The medieval understanding of beauty and health recognized that attractive appearance depended on overall physical and mental well-being, leading to holistic approaches to beauty enhancement that included attention to diet, exercise, sleep, emotional balance, and spiritual development as necessary foundations for external attractiveness, while also acknowledging that cosmetic improvements could enhance mood and self-confidence in ways that contributed to overall health and social effectiveness. Medieval concepts of beauty and community service included expectations that attractive, well-groomed individuals would use their appearance to honor their families, represent their communities positively, and contribute to the overall aesthetic environment that affected everyone's quality of life, making personal beauty choices into forms of social responsibility that required consideration of how individual appearance decisions would impact others and contribute to collective cultural goals. The influence of international trade on medieval beauty culture brought exotic materials, innovative techniques, and foreign aesthetic concepts to European markets through commercial networks that connected medieval consumers to producers across Asia, Africa, and other distant regions, creating opportunities for cultural exchange and aesthetic experimentation, while also raising questions about appropriate borrowing from foreign traditions and the maintenance of Christian European identity in the face of attractive alternatives from other civilizations. Medieval understanding of beauty and seasonal celebrations involved elaborate preparations for festivals, holidays, and special occasions that required coordination between multiple aspects of personal and community appearance. From individual clothing and grooming to collective decorations and ceremonial objects that transformed ordinary spaces into beautiful environments appropriate for marking important cultural and religious observances that reinforced shared values and community identity. The medieval concept of beauty and aging included recognition that different types of attractiveness were appropriate at different life stages, with cultural frameworks that celebrated the fresh appeal of youth, the dignified beauty of maturity, and the wise attractiveness of old age, while providing guidance about how to adapt appearance standards to changing physical capabilities and social roles throughout the human lifespan, without losing appreciation for beauty in all its forms. Medieval beauty practices often required significant time investments, with elaborate hairstyles taking hours to arrange, complex clothing requiring careful maintenance and proper storage, and sophisticated cosmetic routines demanding daily attention and periodic renewal, making the pursuit of fashionable appearance into a major component of daily life for those who could afford the time and resources necessary to meet contemporary aesthetic standards, while also fulfilling their other social and economic obligations. The medieval understanding of beauty and social mobility recognized that appearance could serve as both a reflection of current status and a tool for advancement, with individuals who successfully adopted the aesthetic standards of higher social classes potentially gaining access to better marriage prospects, business opportunities, and social connections, though such efforts were always constrained by economic limitations and social regulations that sought to maintain clear distinctions between different levels of society. Medieval concepts of beauty and regional identity were expressed through distinctive local traditions in clothing styles, jewelry designs, hairstyles, and decorative arts that reflected particular geographic areas while also participating in broader cultural trends, creating complex negotiations between local authenticity and international fashion that required individuals to balance loyalty to their cultural heritage with desire to participate in contemporary aesthetic developments that might originate in distant places. The role of seasonal materials in medieval beauty culture involved the use of different natural ingredients that were available at various times of year, with spring flowers providing fresh cosmetic preparations, summer herbs offering aromatic and medicinal benefits, autumn harvests yielding materials for dyes and preservatives, and winter storage requiring careful planning to maintain beauty supplies throughout the cold months when fresh ingredients were scarce and expensive. Medieval understanding of beauty and spiritual development included recognition that external appearance could either support or hinder religious devotion, depending on whether it encouraged appropriate reverence and moral reflection or distracted attention toward worldly vanity and selfish concerns, leading to complex negotiations about how much attention to personal beauty was compatible with genuine religious commitment and spiritual growth throughout the various stages of religious development and community participation. The medieval understanding of beauty and pilgrimage created unique aesthetic practices among travelers who journeyed to holy sites across Europe and beyond, with pilgrims developing distinctive styles of dress and ornamentation that balanced practical travel requirements with appropriate religious devotion, while also serving as visible markers of their spiritual commitment and cultural sophistication, leading to the emergence of specialized clothing, accessories, and grooming practices that could withstand the rigors of long-distance travel while maintaining the dignity and respectability necessary for approaching sacred sites and participating in religious communities along the way. Medieval concepts of beauty and manuscript illumination were closely connected, with the aesthetic principles that governed personal appearance also influencing the creation of decorated books and documents that were considered among the most beautiful objects of their time, leading to cross-pollination between fashion trends and artistic styles that created coherent aesthetic environments where clothing, architecture, decorative arts, and written materials all participated in unified visual cultures that reinforced shared values and cultural identity through their commitment to similar principles of color, proportion, and symbolic meaning. The role of mirrors and reflection in medieval beauty culture was complicated by both technological limitations and religious teachings about vanity and self-examination, with the few mirrors that existed being highly valued, but also potentially dangerous objects that could encourage excessive attention to physical appearance at the expense of spiritual development, leading to complex cultural negotiations about the appropriate use of reflective surfaces for grooming and self-knowledge, while avoiding the spiritual pitfalls associated with narcissism and worldly preoccupation. Medieval understanding of beauty and musical performance recognized that physical attractiveness could enhance the effectiveness of singers, dancers, and other entertainers, while also acknowledging that true artistic beauty transcended mere physical appeal to encompass skill, creativity, and emotional expression that could move audiences regardless of the performer's conventional attractiveness, creating sophisticated appreciations of aesthetic achievement that valued both visual and auditory elements while recognizing their complex interactions in live performance contexts. The medieval concept of seasonal color symbolism influenced beauty practices through elaborate systems of meaning that associated different hues with particular times of year, religious observances, and spiritual states, requiring individuals to coordinate their clothing and decoration choices with liturgical calendars and natural cycles, while also expressing personal taste and social status within culturally acceptable parameters that demonstrated their knowledge of symbolic traditions and their commitment to appropriate participation in community life. Medieval beauty practices often involved the creation of specialized spaces within homes and communities that were dedicated to grooming and aesthetic preparation, with wealthy households maintaining elaborate chambers, equipped with the tools, materials, and furnishings necessary for sophisticated beauty routines, while also providing appropriate settings for the social interactions and cultural activities that accompanied these practices, making beauty preparation into a form of domestic architecture that reflected and reinforced social hierarchies and cultural values. The influence of classical rhetoric on medieval beauty standards came through educational traditions that taught the importance of appropriate presentation and persuasive appearance in public speaking and social interaction, leading to recognition that physical attractiveness and refined grooming could enhance an individual's effectiveness in political, commercial, and social contexts, while also contributing to their moral authority and cultural credibility in communities that valued both inner virtue and outer refinement. Medieval concepts of beauty and diplomatic relations included attention to how personal and collective appearance could influence international negotiations and cultural exchanges, with rulers and ambassadors carefully managing their aesthetic presentation to communicate power, wealth, sophistication, and cultural values to foreign audiences, while also demonstrating respect for their hosts and appropriate understanding of diplomatic protocols that required sensitivity to different aesthetic traditions and social expectations. The medieval understanding of beauty and urban development recognized that attractive cities and buildings contributed to the well-being and cultural development of their inhabitants, leading to significant investments in architectural ornamentation, public spaces, and urban planning that created beautiful environments for daily life, while also serving practical functions related to commerce, governance, and community gathering, demonstrating the medieval belief that beauty was not a luxury, but a necessity for fully human existence. Medieval beauty standards were transmitted through various forms of popular culture, including songs, stories, and folk traditions that preserved and disseminated aesthetic ideals across different social classes and geographic regions, creating shared frameworks for understanding attractiveness that transcended formal educational systems and court cultures, while also adapting these ideals to local conditions and popular sensibilities that made beauty culture accessible to broader segments of medieval society. The role of seasonal festivals in medieval beauty culture provided regular opportunities for communities to engage in collective aesthetic activities that reinforced cultural values, while also allowing for creativity and innovation within traditional frameworks, with celebrations like May Day, harvest festivals, and winter holidays requiring elaborate preparations that combined individual grooming and decoration with community-wide projects that transformed entire towns and villages into temporary works of art. Medieval understanding of beauty and legal systems included recognition that appearance could influence judicial proceedings and legal outcomes, with defendants and witnesses often paying careful attention to their grooming and clothing choices when appearing before courts or other official bodies, while legal documents sometimes specified appearance requirements for different types of proceedings and social positions, demonstrating the medieval belief that external presentation reflected internal character in ways that were relevant to questions of justice and social order. The medieval concept of beauty and family relationships involved complex negotiations about how individual aesthetic choices would affect family reputation and social standing, with parents, spouses, and other relatives having legitimate interests in each other's appearance decisions, while also respecting personal preferences and individual expression within culturally appropriate boundaries that balanced family honor with personal autonomy in matters of grooming and self-presentation. Medieval beauty practices often served multiple generations simultaneously, with grandparents, parents, and children participating in shared grooming activities and aesthetic traditions that strengthened family bonds while also preserving cultural knowledge and skills that might otherwise be lost during periods of social change or economic disruption, creating intergenerational communities of aesthetic practice that ensured continuity in beauty culture across the challenges and opportunities of medieval life. The influence of weather and climate on medieval beauty standards was significant, with different regions developing aesthetic traditions that were adapted to local environmental conditions, while also reflecting broader European cultural trends, leading to distinctive regional variations in clothing styles, fabric choices, color preferences, and grooming practices that balanced practical considerations with aesthetic goals and cultural identity within the constraints imposed by geography and seasonal patterns. Medieval concepts of beauty and economic development included recognition that luxury trades related to clothing, cosmetics, jewelry, and other aesthetic goods could contribute significantly to local and regional prosperity, while also providing employment for skilled craftsmen and creating markets for international trade that connected European consumers to global networks of production and distribution that brought exotic materials and innovative techniques to medieval beauty culture. The medieval understanding of beauty and social reform involved ongoing debates about appropriate levels of luxury and ornamentation that balanced individual freedom of expression with community welfare and moral development, leading to various attempts at regulating beauty practices through sumptuary laws, religious teachings, and social pressure that sought to maintain social order, while also allowing for the aesthetic creativity and cultural development that made life more meaningful and enjoyable for medieval people. Medieval beauty standards were influenced by military culture and chivalric ideals that emphasized the importance of impressive appearance for warriors and knights who needed to project authority, inspire confidence, and demonstrate their social status through their equipment, clothing, and personal grooming, while also maintaining practical functionality for combat and travel, creating distinctive aesthetic traditions that combined martial effectiveness with aristocratic refinement. The role of professional guilds in medieval beauty culture extended beyond the regulation of individual crafts to include coordination between different trades that contributed to overall aesthetic achievement, with textile workers, metal workers, jewelers, and other specialists collaborating on projects that required multiple types of expertise, while also maintaining quality standards and pricing structures that made luxury goods accessible to appropriate segments of society, while preserving the economic viability of beauty-related industries. Medieval concepts of beauty and intellectual development included recognition that aesthetic appreciation and artistic judgment were important components of education that contributed to overall cultural sophistication and moral development, leading to educational curricula that included instruction in art, music, poetry, and other cultural areas that develop students' capacity for recognizing and creating beauty, while also teaching them about the connections between aesthetic achievement and human flourishing. The medieval understanding of beauty and technological innovation involved appreciation for the creativity and skill required to develop new techniques for producing textiles, cosmetics, jewelry, and other aesthetic goods under the constraints of contemporary technology and available materials, leading to recognition of craftsmen and inventors who advanced the possibilities for beauty culture through their technical achievements and artistic innovations that expanded the range of aesthetic options available to medieval consumers. Medieval beauty practices often involved complex scheduling and coordination to accommodate the multiple activities and social obligations that required different types of aesthetic preparation, with individuals needing to plan their grooming routines around religious observances, seasonal celebrations, family events, and professional responsibilities, while also maintaining their overall appearance at levels appropriate to their social status and personal circumstances throughout the changing demands of daily life. The influence of literary culture on medieval beauty standards came through popular romances, epic poems, and religious texts that provided detailed descriptions of attractive characters and beautiful objects that served as models for contemporary aesthetic ideals, while also reinforcing cultural values about the relationships between physical beauty, moral virtue, and spiritual development that shaped individual choices about personal appearance and community standards for evaluating attractiveness. Medieval understanding of beauty and psychological well-being recognized that attractive appearance and beautiful environments could contribute to mental health and emotional stability, while also acknowledging that excessive preoccupation with beauty could become problematic if it distracted attention from more important spiritual and social concerns, leading to balanced approaches that sought to enhance quality of life through aesthetic pleasure, while maintaining appropriate priorities and moral perspective. The medieval concept of beauty and historical continuity involved recognition that contemporary aesthetic practices were part of longer cultural traditions that connected present communities to their ancestral heritage, while also allowing for adaptation and innovation that responded to changing conditions and new opportunities, creating dynamic traditions that preserved essential cultural values while also evolving in response to historical developments and cultural exchange. Medieval beauty standards were influenced by medical theories that connected physical appearance to overall health and constitutional balance, with physicians prescribing aesthetic treatments and lifestyle modifications that promised to enhance attractiveness, while also improving general well-being through attention to diet, exercise, sleep patterns, and emotional equilibrium that were believed to affect both internal health and external appearance in ways that made beauty and medicine complementary, rather than competing approaches to human flourishing. The role of seasonal storage and preservation in medieval beauty culture required sophisticated planning and resource management to maintain supplies of cosmetics, perfumes, and other perishable beauty products throughout the year, with individuals and households developing elaborate systems for gathering, preparing, and storing natural ingredients that would provide consistent access to aesthetic materials, despite seasonal variations in availability and quality that could otherwise disrupt beauty routines and social presentation. Medieval concepts of beauty and community leadership included expectations that individuals in positions of authority would demonstrate their fitness for responsibility through appropriate attention to personal appearance and aesthetic refinement that communicated their cultural sophistication and moral authority, while also inspiring confidence and respect among their followers and constituents who looked to them for examples of proper behavior and cultural values. The medieval understanding of beauty and cultural exchange involved complex negotiations about how to incorporate foreign aesthetic influences while maintaining authentic cultural identity, with communities and individuals making selective adaptations of international beauty trends that enriched local traditions without compromising essential values or losing connection to their historical heritage and social foundation that provided stability and meaning in an often chaotic and uncertain world. Medieval beauty practices often required significant investment in education and training to master the complex skills necessary for achieving fashionable appearance, with young people serving apprenticeships with experienced practitioners, while also receiving formal instruction in the cultural knowledge and aesthetic judgment needed to make appropriate choices about personal presentation within their social contexts and individual circumstances throughout their lives and changing roles in medieval society. The medieval understanding of beauty and seasonal rhythms created a profound connection between human aesthetic practices and the natural world that surrounded and sustained medieval communities, with people timing their grooming routines, clothing changes, and decorative activities to harmonize with the cycles of planting and harvest, religious observance and celebration. Light and darkness that governed all aspects of life in an agricultural society where human survival depended on maintaining proper relationships with natural forces and cosmic patterns that medieval people understood as expressions of divine will and eternal order. Medieval concepts of beauty and artistic achievement recognized that the creation of beautiful objects, spaces, and experiences required not only technical skill and cultural knowledge, but also spiritual inspiration and moral virtue that connected human creativity to divine artistry, leading to aesthetic traditions that valued both craftsmanship and character, while also acknowledging that true beauty emerged from the collaboration between human effort and divine grace that made possible the transcendent experiences of wonder, joy, and reverence that medieval people sought through their engagement with art, music, literature, and all forms of cultural expression. The legacy of medieval beauty standards continued to influence European culture long after the medieval period ended, with many fundamental concepts about appropriate appearance, social hierarchy, and the relationship between external beauty and internal virtue persisting in modified forms through subsequent historical periods, and contributing to ongoing debates about fashion, aesthetics, and human values that remain relevant to contemporary discussions about identity, self-expression, and cultural meaning in societies that still grapple with questions about the proper role of beauty in human life and social organization. Medieval beauty culture ultimately represented a comprehensive attempt to create harmony between individual desires for attractiveness and pleasure with community needs for order, meaning, and spiritual development, resulting in sophisticated systems of aesthetic practice that enhanced quality of life, while also reinforcing cultural values and social structures that provided stability and continuity across generations of medieval people who understood beauty not as superficial decoration, but as an essential aspect of human dignity and divine creation that deserved careful attention, thoughtful cultivation, and appropriate appreciation throughout all the stages and circumstances of human existence in a world that was both beautiful and challenging, meaningful and mysterious, temporal and eternal in its fundamental nature and ultimate purpose. The medieval journey toward beauty was thus both deeply personal and profoundly communal, requiring individuals to develop their own aesthetic sensibilities and grooming practices, while also participating in collective traditions and social networks that sustained and transmitted the cultural knowledge necessary for creating and appreciating beauty in all its forms. From the most intimate details of personal appearance to the grandest expressions of architectural and artistic achievement that transformed medieval communities into environments where human beings could flourish not only physically and economically, but also spiritually and aesthetically in ways that honored both their earthly needs and their eternal aspirations toward truth, goodness, and beauty that medieval thinkers understood as the fundamental attributes of divine nature, reflected in human experience and cultural creation. In this way, medieval beauty standards served as bridges between the material and spiritual dimensions of human existence, helping individuals and communities navigate the complex relationships between body and soul, time and eternity, individual expression and social responsibility that characterized medieval life and continue to challenge human beings in every historical period as they seek to create meaningful lives that honor both their physical nature and their spiritual aspirations through the cultivation of beauty, wisdom, and virtue in all their various forms and expressions throughout the ongoing human adventure of seeking fulfillment, purpose, and transcendence in a world that offers both limitations and possibilities, sorrows and joys, challenges and opportunities for those who learn to see and create beauty wherever they find themselves in the great tapestry of existence that connects all human experience across time and space in the eternal quest for truth and meaning that defines the deepest aspirations of the human spirit in every age and culture. The medieval understanding of beauty reached its fullest expression in the recognition that all aesthetic pursuits were ultimately reflections of humanity's deepest longing for connection with the divine source of all beauty, creating a unified vision of existence where personal grooming, artistic creation, architectural achievement, and spiritual development were understood as different aspects of the same fundamental human calling to participate consciously in the ongoing creation and appreciation of beauty that transformed ordinary life into sacred experience and elevated daily activities into forms of prayer and worship that honored both the Creator and the creation through dedicated attention to excellence, harmony, and transcendence in every dimension of human experience. Medieval people thus lived within aesthetic frameworks that encompassed everything from the most intimate details of personal appearance to the most ambitious collective projects of cathedral building and manuscript illumination, creating comprehensive cultures of beauty that integrated practical necessity with spiritual aspiration, while also providing meaningful roles for individuals at every level of society who could contribute their particular skills and insights to the great collaborative work of making the world more beautiful, more harmonious, and more worthy of the divine love that medieval theology taught was the ultimate source and goal of all authentic humans striving toward truth, goodness, and beauty in their perfect unity. The medieval legacy of beauty consciousness continued to influence European civilization through subsequent centuries as Renaissance artists rediscovered classical proportions and humanistic values. Baroque craftsmen created elaborate decorative schemes that celebrated both earthly and heavenly splendor. Romantic poets and painters explored the connections between natural beauty and spiritual experience. And modern designers have sought to recover the integration of functional and aesthetic considerations that characterized medieval approaches to everything from clothing and jewelry to furniture and architecture, demonstrating the enduring relevance of medieval insights about the essential role of beauty in creating environments that support human flourishing and cultural development. In the end, medieval beauty standards represented far more than temporary fashion trends or superficial concerns with appearance, but rather embodied comprehensive philosophies of human nature and social organization that recognized beauty as one of the fundamental requirements for meaningful existence, alongside truth and goodness, in communities that sought to create earthly reflections of heavenly perfection through the patient cultivation of aesthetic sensitivity, artistic skill, and spiritual wisdom that could transform both individuals and societies into more complete expressions of their highest potentials and deepest aspirations for harmony, meaning, and transcendent purpose. The medieval journey toward beauty was thus both a deeply personal quest for individual fulfillment and a collective cultural project that required the cooperation of countless people across many generations who shared their knowledge, refined their techniques, and transmitted their values through the complex networks of family relationships, professional guilds, religious communities, and social institutions that sustained medieval civilization and enabled it to create lasting achievements in art, literature, architecture, and all forms of cultural expression that continue to inspire wonder and appreciation in contemporary audiences who recognize in medieval beauty culture a sophisticated understanding of human nature and social possibility that remains relevant to ongoing efforts to create more beautiful, meaningful, and fulfilling ways of life in every historical period. Medieval beauty standards ultimately testified to the profound human capacity for recognizing, creating, and appreciating beauty in all its forms, while also demonstrating the essential connections between aesthetic achievement and moral development, individual expression and social responsibility, temporal pleasure and eternal significance that continue to challenge and inspire human beings in their ongoing quest to understand themselves and their place in a universe that offers both beauty and meaning to those who learn to see with eyes trained by wisdom, love, and reverent attention to the mysterious gift of existence itself in all its complexity, wonder, and ultimate purpose that transcends any single historical period, while finding particular expression in each culture's distinctive contributions to the great human conversation about truth, beauty, goodness, and the sacred dimensions of life that make human existence both challenging and deeply rewarding for those who embrace their calling to participate consciously and creatively in the ongoing adventure of becoming fully human in a world that needs their unique gifts and perspectives to achieve its own highest possibilities for harmony, justice, and transcendent meaning. Thus ended the medieval understanding of beauty, not with any final conclusion, but with the recognition that beauty itself is eternal and inexhaustible, always offering new discoveries and deeper appreciations to those who approach it with the patience, wisdom, and reverent attention that medieval people cultivated through centuries of dedicated practice and thoughtful reflection on the mysterious connections between human creativity and divine love that make possible all authentic experiences of beauty, meaning, and transcendence in every age and culture, that learns to honor both the material and spiritual dimensions of existence through the cultivation of aesthetic sensitivity, moral virtue, and spiritual wisdom that transform ordinary life into sacred adventure and elevate human experience toward its highest possibilities for fulfillment, purpose, and joyful participation in the eternal dance of creation that continues always. In every moment and every place where human beings remember their calling to create and appreciate beauty as one of their most fundamental responsibilities and most precious privileges in the great mystery of existence that surrounds and sustains all life with infinite love, wisdom, and creative possibility.